servicing the Filipino and Filipino Americans all over the world. Radio, streaming live in the internet every Tuesday from 1 o'clock to 2:30 p.m. Seattle, USA time. We are your hosts, Kuya Bert Kawili, Emma Heron, and
Manny Panganiban. Radio.
Radio.
The 7th annual Jackson Street Jazz Walks virtual concert will be held February 27th and 28th at 7 p.m. It's free to the public with all donations benefiting the Central Area Senior Center. Join us for the Delvon Lamar Organ Trio, Eugenie Jones, Alex Dugdale, the Devon and Donovan Lewis Drumoff, and more. For more information, please visit jacksonstreetjazz.org. That's www.jacksonstreetjazz.org.
Rainier Avenue Radio.world is your 24/7 digital media hub. Tune in at Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and TuneIn apps.
Hello, you're listening to the news on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. I'm Kendra.
And I'm Asher.
Today is Wednesday, February 24th. The news on Rainier Avenue Radio is live every Wednesday from 6:30 to 7 p.m., providing you with current, trustworthy, useful news content focused on super service to the local South Seattle audience. We'll not tell you what to think, but instead provide the basis for you to discern and decide for yourself. Tonight, we'll talk about the monument to Washington's first Black pioneer, the Daniel Prude case, Bulgaria's mass vaccination, and AFC South rivals helping Texas. Now, before we get on to the local news, Daniel Bells, aka D Money, actually told me about a story related to Rainier Avenue Radio. See, a natural gas leak and underground fire in Seattle's Central District caused power outages and evacuations today. One Chopper 7 for Cairo 7 News was above the flames burning on the sidewalk of the 2700 block of East Cherry Street, the fire having started at 11 a.m. D-Money told me that because it directly affected the station in this way, the power was out at the station for about 3 hours, and they had to cancel a scheduled live interview with Olu Dixon at noon because of it. Power is obviously back at the studio, but this underground gas fire happened a block away. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go on over to Cairo 7. Now, let's get on with the actual global news. Asher?
Local news or global news? Local news, I bet. When temperatures dropped below freezing earlier this month amid a winter snowstorm, more than 200 people sought shelter inside emergency facilities set up by Seattle officials. For the Seattle Times, the winter storm tested the city's emergency response to unsheltered homelessness at a time when the pandemic has forced shelter operators to thin out overcrowded facilities, and outdoor homelessness has become even more visible on city streets. An estimated 3,700 people live outside or in places not designed for human habitation in Seattle. And last year, 6 people presumed to be homeless died of causes involving hypothermia. Over the course of a week starting February 9th, the city opened up 4 severe weather shelters at City Hall, Fisher Pavilion at Seattle Center, and the Garfield and Bitter Lake Community Centers. Each shelter was open 24 hours and had meals provided by OSL, formerly called Operation Sack Lunch. By the end of the week, service providers and the city made 83 referrals for people to get into other shelters and hotels beyond the severe weather event.
9 candidates are running for the open seat on the King Conservation District's Board of Supervisors for this March's election. Per Patch.com, historically, King Conservation District elections have garnered low voter turnout, often falling below 1%. Unlike other elections, voters will not receive ballots in the mail and must return them electronically or print and mail them by March 23rd. The board is comprised of 3 elected members and 2 appointed by the Washington State Conservation Commission. Voters are eligible to participate in the election in most of the county, excluding the cities of Enumclaw, Federal Way, Milton, Pacific, and Skykomish. The 9 candidates seeking election are Brittany Bush-Bollet, Callie Clark, John Comerford, Daryl De La Rente, Wayne Goldstud, Doug Hennick, Natalie Reber, Melissa Tatro, and David Toledo. Each candidate's statement is available online.
The Washington State Capitol will receive a new monument honoring the state's first black pioneer, George Bush, and his son, William Owen Bush, who was the state's first black lawmaker. According to Como News, the monument is a collaboration between the Department of the Washington State Historical Society. Bush, who was biracial, helped lead families from Missouri in 1844 to settle in what is now Tumwater, Washington. The monument is expected to receive funding through an appropriation made by the state legislature this year. The installment could happen as early as this summer.
Flu activity remains minimal in Washington and across most of the nation. Per Patch.com, the University of Washington Virology Lab randomly tests specimens for influenza at the city's COVID-19 testing sites. On Tuesday, UW researchers said they had found no new cases for the entire month. Among the more than 40,000 samples screened since November, UW Virology said patients at testing sites returned positive for the flu just 4 times. The latest data out of Seattle supports statewide data from the Department of Health, which has confirmed 0 flu-related deaths this season and virtually no influenza infections. At this point in the flu season last year, more than 6 deaths were linked to influenza in Washington. Additionally, the state's long-term care facilities have reported no flu outbreaks.
A new variant of the coronavirus has been detected in Washington state. Per Patch.com, the B.1351 variant was first identified in South Africa in December, but has since been found in 10 states, including this latest case in Washington. The case was identified in a King County patient who tested positive for the coronavirus back on January 29th. The Department of Health says any other details on the patient or the potential spread of the variant remains scarce, as the patient could not be reached through contact tracing efforts. Experts say now that the first case of the variant has been discovered, more are likely to turn up. Though these cases have recently been on the decline, these variants could undo that progress. B.1.1.7 does not appear to spread more easily or quickly than the predominant strain. However, it may be more resilient to vaccines.
The Washington Attorney General's office said that the investigation into the death of Manuel Ellis, the man killed while under arrest in Tacoma in March of 2020, will likely reach a conclusion by the first week of April. Per Como News, Ellis died on March 3rd while walking home from a convenience store. Tacoma officers said they saw Ellis trying to force his way into the vehicle, and when they tried to stop him, Ellis turned violent. The Pierce County medical examiner said he died as a result of respiratory arrest due to physical restraint with contributing factors, including methamphetamine intoxication and an enlarged heart. The in-custody death was referred to the Pierce County Sheriff's Office for an investigation into the use of force. In December, after months into the investigation, a clear conflict of interest surfaced when a Pierce County sergeant was identified as being involved in the arrest. An attorney for the Ellis family alleged a cover-up after the discovery, and the case was pushed to the Washington State Patrol and Attorney General's Office for investigation. This is the news on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. When we come back with national news, you'll hear about the Daniel Prude case and more. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. This is the national news. 5 million children in the U.S. rely on public schools to teach them English, and those kids have been hit hard by online schooling. Per NPR, children learning English are more likely to struggle in school and drop out, and school districts in several states, including Maryland, Virginia, and California, already have data showing these students are falling further behind. Among the challenges, there are fewer resources for teaching English learners remotely, and many English learners are less likely to have access to technology. Even in a school district like Prince George's, which has distributed free devices and mobile Wi-Fi units, these children may not have the support at home to navigate technology. One educator said when children are learning another language, it's important for them to see the nuances of communication, such as facial expressions or other nonverbal signs, but those are harder to make out on a screen.
President Biden's historic pick to manage the nation's public lands and national resources promised to strike a balance between fossil fuel and renewable energy development during her confirmation hearing Tuesday. For NPR, Congresswoman Deb Haaland would be not just the first Native American Interior Secretary, but also the first in a presidential cabinet. She faced tough and at times very misguided questioning from Republican lawmakers worried about the president's climate goals. Numerous Republican senators focused their questioning on Biden's oil and gas leasing quote-unquote ban on federal lands, citing projected economic and job losses from the executive action. Haaland repeatedly pointed out that the president has not banned new oil and gas leasing, but paused it while his administration reviews the federal leasing program. Biden has promised to move the country away from climate-warming fossil fuels and invest in renewable energy. Haaland said, quote, "That isn't going to happen overnight."
San Francisco-based One Medical administered COVID-19 vaccinations to people deemed ineligible for the scarce vaccine by local health departments, including people with connections to company leaders and customers of its concierge medical service. Per NPR, the national healthcare provider was allocated thousands of vaccine doses by local health departments in some of the areas they provide medical services. Ineligible individuals with connections to the company leadership were set up with vaccine appointments, and patients who were disqualified from receiving the vaccine were nonetheless permitted to skip the line ahead of other high-risk patients. One Medical has branded itself as a high-end healthcare provider, serving a relatively affluent clientele that pays $199 fee annually to receive easy online access to appointments, telemedicine, and access to a streamlined tech-focused medical experience. The company went public with an IPO in January 2020 with a valuation in the billions.
5 out-of-state board members of the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, the entity that maintains and operates much of the state's electricity grid, resigned today. For NPR, the resignations come as Texas still grapples with the aftermath of last week's winter storm that, at its worst, left more than 4 million residents in the dark and cold for days. Ratepayers and politicians have criticized ERCOT's leadership for failing to prepare for the winter storm and for seating board members that don't live in Texas. In the immediate days after the record cold temperatures, customers reported exorbitantly high electricity bills. On Monday, we covered a story about how one family sued the company for $100 million because their 11-year-old child froze to death. State officials have called for an investigation into ERCOT's failures.
A federal judge late Tuesday indefinitely banned President Joe Biden's administration from enforcing a 100-day moratorium on most deportations. Per NPR, Biden proposed the 100-day pause on deportations during his campaign as part of a larger review of immigration enforcement and an attempt to reverse the priorities of former President Trump. Biden has proposed a sweeping immigration bill that would allow the legalization of an estimated 11 million people living in the U.S. illegally. He has also instituted other guidelines on whom immigration and border agents should target for enforcement. The judge, a Trump appointee, initially ruled on January 26 that the moratorium violated federal law on administrative procedure and that the U.S. failed to show why a deportation pause was justified. A temporary restraining order the judge issued was set to expire on Tuesday. In the days that followed his ruling, authorities deported 15 people to Jamaica and hundreds of others to Central America.
A New York grand jury voted that no charges will be filed against Rochester police officers in connection with the March 2020 death of Daniel Prude, a black man who was in the midst of a mental health crisis during his encounter with the police. For NPR, Prude's family uncovered video footage showing officers pinning him to the ground while he was in handcuffs and with a mesh hood over his head. Police body camera footage of the arrest sparked outrage when it was published in September, prompting days of protests and accusations of a cover-up by city officials. Several members of the Rochester Police Department command staff either resigned or were fired in the wake of the incident and ensuing protests, and city officials have pledged reforms. Rochester police also drew renewed scrutiny again in recent weeks when body cam video emerged showing officers handcuffing and pepper spraying a 9-year-old girl while responding to a call about a family disturbance. The police officers have since been suspended, pending the conclusion of an internal investigation. This has been the news on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. When we come back with global news, you'll hear about Bulgaria's mass vaccination and more. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Rainier Avenue Radio World. This is the global news. At least 79 inmates have been killed in simultaneous fights in 4 jails in Ecuador, one of the deadliest incidents in the country's prisons in years. For BBC News, the military and riot police have been deployed in an effort to quell the violence, which started on Tuesday. Experts say the fights were prompted by a battle for control of the jails after a gang leader was killed in December. The number of dead is higher than the total of inmates killed in 2019 and 2020 combined. Early on Wednesday local time, prison authorities said the situation was now, quote-unquote, under control. They updated the number of dead and said the violence has also engulfed a 4th jail. The deadliest incident happened in Turi prison in the city of Cuneca, where 34 were killed. There were also fatalities in 2 prisons in the city of Guayaquil, in a jail in La Casunga. All of those killed were inmates.
Workers renovating a bar in Seville, Spain, have uncovered a well-preserved hammam, or bathhouse, believed to date back to the 12th century. Per BBC News, the discovery was, quote-unquote, completely unexpected inside the Heralda bar in the city center. A star-shaped skylight emerged immediately after the workers began hammering the walls of the building. They then uncovered nearly 90 skylights in the roof of the Moorish-style bar. Experts are crediting an early 20th century architect, Vicente Traver, saying it was him who decided to hide the room during the installation of the 2 additional floors.
On Monday, hundreds of coffins tumbled from their resting place in northwest Italy when a landslide destabilized a 100-year-old cliffside cemetery. For BBC News, the cemetery walls had rows of coffins entombed in the traditional Italian style. Workers close by captured footage of the moment when walls began to shake and crack. Seconds later, they broke apart and crashed down into Ligurian Sea beneath the fishing village. Local workers had noticed cracks in the cliffs and realized there was a risk of collapse in the days before. Divers from the fire brigade, Coast Guard boats, and firefighters have been assisting in the search for the remains of the cemetery. Around 10 of the estimated 200 coffins have been recovered.
The first wave of coronavirus vaccines from the COVAX initiative are now reaching their destinations. Ghana became the first country to receive the vaccine, marking an important step for the international effort to help low and middle-income countries cope with the COVID-19 pandemic. As the first round of allocations continues to roll out, more countries will receive their own doses in coming days, according to the World Health Organization, a leader in the initiative. In all, the COVAX Alliance hopes to deliver nearly 2 billion doses of the vaccine this year. A UNICEF representative told NPR that the country met conditions for receiving the vaccine. After Ghana's national deployment and vaccination plan was approved, the country was added to the allocation process. Other factors affecting when countries receive the vaccine include the speed with which they get national approval and provide an important license for the COVID-19 vaccines.
In an effort to boost vaccination rates among a skeptical public, Bulgaria has opened up COVID-19 inoculation to all who want them. For NPR, Bulgaria first began administering the shots on December 27th. Before the mass vaccination campaign began Saturday, Bulgaria had one of the lowest vaccination rates in Europe, with fewer than 1% of Bulgarians having taken the first dose and fewer than half of those fully vaccinated as of February 14th. Since the mass vaccination campaign began, more than 30,000 people have received a first shot. Thousands stood in line for hours over the weekend at vaccination points set up at hospitals in Sofia, with temperatures hovering around freezing. As of February 18th, 229,679 cases of COVID-19 had been reported in Bulgaria, with 9,624 cases. As of February 14th, about 200,000 vaccine doses had been delivered in Bulgaria, with more expected to arrive in the coming days.
A German court has sentenced a former Syrian intelligence officer to 4.5 years in jail for complicity in crimes against humanity. Per BBC News, prosecutors in Koblenz successfully argued that 44-year-old Ayad al-Gharib had helped to arrest protesters in 2011 who were later tortured and murdered. Another Syrian 50-year-old al-Raslan remains on trial. Both fled Syria's civil war and got asylum in Germany and were arrested in 2019. The case was unprecedented for hours of testimony describing widespread torture in Syria. This has been the news on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. We'll come back with sports news. You'll hear about AFC South rivals helping Texas and more. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. This is the sports news. Remy Martin scored 26 points, and Kimani Lawrence scored 22, and Arizona State walloped Washington 97-64. For Como News, Lawrence finished 9 for 11 shooting, but it was Martin's late first half outburst that helped seal the Huskies' fate. Premier Wright threw down a dunk for Washington and rescued the Huskies' deficit to 30-25 with 6 minutes 13 seconds before intermission. 6 and 13 before intermission. That led to an Arizona State eruption in which the Sun Devils outscored Washington 9-4 for a 20-point halftime lead. Martin scored 9 straight to start the outburst and 13 of the 19. Marcus Sohonis scored 16 points for Washington.
This fall, the doors will open to a brand new Climate Pledge arena with a historic Seattle twist. Per Como News, the iconic Key Arena roof that made its debut in Seattle during the 1962 World's Fair will be part of the new arena. Reportedly, the roof was a non-negotiable part, and it was a major challenge. As Climate Pledge gets ready to be a carbon-neutral, sustainable building, there will be other challenges, mainly related to your fan experience. One of the standout sustainable aspects of the new arena is the role of the iconic roof, which will play in the ice with the Seattle Kraken will ultimately skate on. There's still lots of work to be done before the doors at the Climate Pledge open. One sure sign they are close to finish will be later this summer when all the toilets are put to the test. But will fans be in the building to put everything to the test this fall? There's hope that this will be the case.
San Jose's game against Vegas, scheduled for Thursday night, has been postponed after a Sharks player entered the NHL's COVID protocol. Per ESPN, the 36th NHL game this season to be postponed for virus-related issues and 40th counting the Texas snowstorm that affected Dallas. The Sharks' facilities have been closed. The team canceled practice Wednesday, but said the decision and the postponement, quote, was made out of an abundance of caution. The NHL had a season-low 8 players on its COVID protocol list on Tuesday, 5 of them from Philadelphia. That's down from a season high of 59 just 11 days ago. The Calgary Flames and Montreal Canadiens remain perfect so far this season, as neither team has had a player put on the list. The St. Louis Blues and Toronto Maple Leafs have had a player added to the COVID list over the past few days, bringing the total number of players who have spent at least one day on it to 126.
The AFC South is pitching in to help out one of their own. Per ESPN, the Jacksonville Jaguars, Tennessee Titans, and Indianapolis Colts are combining to donate $100,000 to the Houston Harris County 2021 Winter Storm Relief Fund to help residents impacted by the severe winter weather that hit the state last week. The NFL Foundation has agreed to also meet that donation. The Houston Harris County Winter Storm Relief Fund will focus on grants to local nonprofits that will help families that need additional help from the storm damage to recover. It includes helping with home repairs and supplementing help from other local and federal efforts. The Washington Post reported last Sunday that at least 58 people died in the 2 major winter storms that struck the country. 32 of the people were killed in Texas, where power outages left many without heat and freezing temperatures.
The NBA released its schedule for the second half of the regular season. laying out how it plans to have all 30 teams play 72 games despite the ongoing pandemic. For ESPN, the NBA unveiled only its first half schedule in early December, allowing it flexibility to adjust as the pandemic inevitably wreaked havoc on its attempts to play games outside of the safe confines of a bubble like the one the league finished last season in. To try to make things as fair as possible, each team was scheduled to play either 37 or 38 games across the 73 days that first half schedule was set to run. Due to the pandemic, however, and the ongoing issues it has caused some teams, there is no such equity in the second half schedule. It is no coincidence, for example, that the 4 teams playing in the first night back, the Washington Wizards, who will be in Memphis to take on the Grizzlies, and the Spurs, who will have to travel to Dallas to take the Mavericks, all have been significantly impacted by COVID-19 in the first half of the season.
Former NFL players Chris Long, Harry Sidney, and Twan Russell have been awarded funding for their nonprofit foundations through the league's Legends Impact Grant program. Per ESPN, the award is a component of the NFL Foundation's Player Foundation Grant Initiative and supports ex-players in their commitment to making their communities, quote, happy, healthy, and safe, unquote. The Russell Education Foundation will receive $50,000. The mission of the Chris Long Foundation will receive $30,000, and My Brother's Keeper will receive $40,000.
Now it's time to go over tonight's show plugs. For the remainder of Black History Month, RAR has set events you should attend. Tonight at 8 p.m. is Benjamin Hunter, live music performance from the historic Columbia City Theater. Tomorrow at 6 p.m. is Seattle Here and Now with John Yasutake. Joining Mr. Yasutake is Mr. James Hasty, a local product business and former professional football player sharing his life story. On Friday from 6 to 7 p.m. is Workshop Racial Equity in the Seattle film industry with guests Virginia Bogart, Kirsten Ellerson, Clevin Tykeson. Also on Friday, starting at 7 p.m., is Family Film Night with the movies Malik and Black June. Lastly, on Saturday, starting at noon, is Experience, another live music performance at Columbia City Theater. This has been the news on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Tonight was Kendra's last show, and the show will be on indefinite leave for the time being. Thank you so much for watching.
Rainier Avenue Radio.world, breaking radio.